I have a brother and a sister who are journalists, and I was the odd one out in the family. I couldn't write, so I could talk. So that's why they put me into the church. No, it was different than that, but it feels a little bit like Sunday afternoon at home, addressing journalists always. And coming like Helen from Africa, I want to start with a story, a very real story in my own diocese, where I was in a parish and I confirmed this young boy. And I went back to the parish a year later and was met by his grandmother. And the grandmother showed me a picture of his confirmation, because in our diocese, after a confirmation, all the candidates want to stand with the bishop for a photograph. And I said, yes, it was a lovely day. And she said, yes, he died 6 months ago. And as he was dying, he held on to this picture. And he held on to that picture while he's dying because he always talked about his confirmation, because on that day he believed that the church enabled him to be recognized as a real person. And he felt totally affirmed as a person at his confirmation. Now I start that because I think the MDGs are about the mission of the church, the mission of Christ, as Christ seeks to restore our humanity, particularly for those living on the edge. Bishops are leaders of mission of the church in their own diocese. And for many of us, we come from areas where people continually struggle day by day just to survive. In my own diocese, unemployment in the urban areas is around 40-45%. In the rural areas, it's up to 80%. Alongside the Swaziland border, the HIV/AIDS rate is around 80%. The unemployment is around 80%, and the HIV/AIDS rate is around 40%. We've trained over 1,100 home-based care workers so that people can be cared for in their homes, because the hospitals can't cope with them. The MDGs, I believe, have helped to focus the ministry and the mission of the church amongst the poor and amongst the most vulnerable in our society. It says to governments that people matter. It says to governments that people matter more than arms, people matter more than huge bureaucracies, people matter and must come first. And so I have begun to detect a greater partnership between faith-based communities and governments. There was a time when I've been in the AIDS work for over 18 years now, and there was a time when governments were afraid to work with faith-based communities. That's changing. And governments recognize that faith-based communities are able to produce and to deliver and to meet people at the point of need. After all, and I often say this to governments, we're the only organization that has a place in every community where we meet with the people every week. And I would want to appeal to the church to use the churches and the facilities that we have to enable us to develop our mission amongst the poor and the vulnerable in terms of the MDG goals. Still to this day, too many churches stand empty from Sunday to Sunday. We're trying to create safe places in our churches where children and women and anybody who's under any threat can come to our church as a safe place. We're trying to get some of our Mothers' Union people to be there in the afternoons. In my own diocese, we're dealing with registered around 10,000 orphans. And to create safe places in our church, but to use the churches for literacy training, for poverty relief through micro-lending schemes, to enable people to come for counselling, voluntary counselling and testing. it is amazing that when you recognize the capacity the church has and the funds that governments have, there is a potential for a creative partnership. And I do believe that more and more governments are recognizing that. And I hope the governments of Africa, of the subcontinent, of Asia and others will continue to do that. I believe that through the MDGs, the church has shown that it's willing to cooperate, and together we can make the difference and restore to our world a humanity that Christ so longs for us all.